Welcome back from that short lunch break, everyone. I hope you're re-energized for the second part of our day. We will again have two speakers and a panel discussion. Our first speaker, Dr. Larry Lee, directs the activities of staff members in OPQ sub-offices responsible for the quality assessment of regulatory submissions. He represents OPQ in programs and activities that impact quality assessments by coordinating with OPQ, CDER, and ORA. He also serves as the point contact for pharmaceutical industry and scientific and academic groups in developing programs to support science and risk-based application assessment and approval. We will also hear from Dr. Adam Fisher, who is Acting Associate Director of Science and Outreach in OPQ's immediate office. In this position, Dr. Fisher focuses on engaging FDA stakeholders and supporting advanced manufacturing technologies. He previously served as team lead on OPQ's science and research staff and focused on research and assessment of complex drug substances and manufacturing processes. We again encourage you to enter your questions for the speakers in the Q&A chat pod so that we can address them during the panel discussion. Let's now turn our attention over to Dr. Lee.
Hello, I'm Sao Larry Lee, Deputy Director of Science for OPQ and the Chair for the Emerging Technology Program. Today, I will be talking with you about the future of Emerging Technology Program and how we have identified a need to grow and adapt the program to best support the development of emerging technology. Specifically, we call this new version of the program Emerging Technology Program 2.0 or ETP 2.0. Before I jump to ETP 2.0, I would like to first talk about pharmaceutical quality. A quality product of any kind consistently meets the expectations of the user. Drugs are no different. Patients expect safe and effective medicine with every dose they take. Pharmaceutical quality is assuring every dose is safe and effective, free of contamination and defects. This is what gives patients confidence in their next dose of medicine. Now back to the ETP 2.0. By the end of this presentation, we will have covered the following objectives. Learn about the Emerging Technology Program, understand how ETP identified a need to mature its operating model and developed the steps to achieve its future state. Learn how ETP 2.0 enhances program efficiencies and encourages and supports industry adoption of advanced manufacturing technologies. So, what is the Emerging Technology Program? The Emerging Technology Program was established in late 2014 to promote and facilitate the adoption of innovative approaches to pharmaceutical product design and manufacturing. It includes a cross-functional team with representation from all relevant FDA quality review and inspection programs, including Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, Office of Compliance, and Office of Regulatory Affairs. The program provides opportunity to discuss, identify, and resolve technical and regulatory issues during a novel technologies development and adoptions. The program works with many types of technologies. These include continuous manufacturing, accepted technologies, novel dosage forms, modular manufacturing, novel unit operations, advanced analytics, modelings, artificial intelligence and machine learnings, novel container closure systems, and Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing. I mentioned earlier that we are in the process of updating the program. But why was there a need for change? Well, first, it is important to say that the original ETP processes and stakeholders were instrumental in the program's initial success. Between 2014 and 2020, specifically, ETP had increasing proposal submission rates and 8.9 out of 10 industry satisfaction rating, published continuous manufacturing guidance including the ICH Q13, and approved 12 regulatory submissions or applications utilizing new technologies. However, as time progressed, the program encountered challenges to effectively deliver against its mission and purpose. Specifically, the program had an increasing number of requests to work with ETP. Industry was requesting more support from the ETP, and the expectation of ETP is becoming much higher as ETP continues to provide high-quality feedback during the new technology development. In order to address these challenges and create a solution, ETP reviewed the program's current state operating model in order to identify and understand any program gaps, inefficient processes, and challenges. Once we fully understood our current state, we built out the program's future state, the ETP 2.0 operating model. ETP 2.0 specifically focuses on the program's future growth and needs by standardizing and streamlining scalable processes. With ETP 2.0 clearly defined, we created an implementation roadmap to document all the tasks and actions required to move from our current state to the desired future state operating model. So what exactly is ETP 2.0? ETP 2.0 aligns organizational and existing quality assessment components and processes, identifies opportunities to strengthen the program performance. Therefore, ETP 2.0 will create a more efficient program that is better suited to meet the needs of technology development. To successfully implement ETP 2.0, we have identified 11 priorities that will improve our operations and help us effectively meet the needs of industry. These priorities include graduation, knowledge management and transfer, governance, intake, engagement, communications, technology and tools, skills and training, workload management, strategy, and awareness. For each of these priorities, our implementation roadmap identifies the specific tasks and actions that are required for us to achieve ETP 2.0. Here you can see a visual timeline of the information we have discussed today. The program was established in 2014 and experienced initial success working with industry on novel technologies. As the program became more mature, we identified the need to formalize the program structure and operations to support our mission, and that's when we conducted our current state analysis, created the ETP 2.0 operating model and implementation roadmap. This brings us to today, where we are currently implementing the priorities we previously discussed in order to achieve ETP 2.0. Now, I would like to give a more detailed explanation of one of our roadmap priorities, graduation. As you can see here, the Emerging Technology Program serves as an entry point for new technologies being approved by FDA. As industry develops new technologies, they can reach out to ETP and request input and feedback on emerging technology, and at the same time preparing a regulatory submission. If accepted into the program, ETP then will work with industry to discuss, identify, and resolve technical and regulatory issues related to the development and implementation of the novel technology. Eventually, after ETP and FDA has significant experience reviewing a technology, we can designate that the technology is no longer considered emerging and does not need to participate in the program anymore. When this occurs, ETP can decide to graduate the technology and transfer ETP's knowledge and understanding of the technology to reviewers in the standard quality assessment process. Once this occurs, the future regulatory submissions will no longer be accepted by ETP and instead will be directed to the standard quality assessment process. Why is graduation important? And how does it help us to achieve ETP 2.0? Well, there are many benefits to graduation. Specifically, it indicates that FDA has sufficient experience with a technology and is confident industry will submit successful future applications. Provides FDA with capacity to accept future new emerging technology to keep pace with industry innovation. Allows FDA to review more applications while continuing to meet user fee goal dates. In summary, ETP 2.0 enhances program efficiencies and encourages and supports the adoption of innovative technology to modernize pharmaceutical development and manufacturing through close collaboration with industry and other relevant stakeholders. Now it's time for some challenge questions. Our first question is true or false. The Emerging Technology Program has members from Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, Office of Compliance, and Office of Regulatory Affairs. Let me give you a couple seconds to think about the answer for this question. And the correct answer is A, true. For our second question, between 2014 and 2020, how many applications did ETP approve? A, 10, B, 11, C, 12, D, 13. Let me give you a couple seconds to think about the answer for this question. The correct answer is C, 12. And with this, I conclude my presentation and thank you for your time today.
Thank you all for taking the time to join us today to talk about advanced manufacturing at the Pharmaceutical Quality Symposium. I am Adam Fisher, the Associate Director of Science and Outreach in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. And I am also by training a chemical engineer and a person inspired by creativity. So I'm very excited to discuss advanced manufacturing and share a little about what we are doing in CDER to establish a regulatory framework for new technologies. From my view, though, over the last 2 centuries, medicines have evolved from crude herbal or botanical preparations into more sophisticated drugs and drug products. And along with this evolution of medicine, drug manufacturing practices have also advanced from small-scale manual processing with simple tools to the now large-scale production that's part of the trillion-dollar pharmaceutical industry that we regulate. Throughout history, the application of new manufacturing technologies has dramatically increased the agility, efficiency, flexibility, and quality of the production of medicines. So, while I will be giving a very forward-looking talk here today, I do want to emphasize that although pharmaceutical innovations are inherently a thing of the future, they have also been a key part of our history. For today's learning objectives, as part of the symposium, I want to take the opportunity to communicate the importance of advanced manufacturing and how it impacts the public health of all Americans, explain CDER's efforts and the work that we are doing to develop a regulatory framework that accommodates innovations to advance manufacturing. And finally, I want to share progress as it relates to developing that framework and talk a little more about what is on the horizon. So let's start with advanced manufacturing, or AM. AM is an innovative manufacturing technology or approach, and importantly, its intended use that can enhance drug quality, improve the reliability and robustness of the manufacturing process and supply chain, and ultimately increase timely access to quality medicine for the American public. Now, it can integrate novel technological approaches. It can use established techniques in a new or innovative way, or it could apply production methods in a new domain where there are no defined best practices or experience. Now, advanced manufacturing is applicable to both small and large molecules and innovator and generic or biosimilar products. As you may surmise, this is a pretty wide umbrella, and this was intentional, to be inclusive and to keep the focus on the impact to public health. Of course, advanced manufacturing comes with many public health benefits. It can improve drug manufacturing and help ensure that quality medicine is available. Six Sigma manufacturing is something that people talk about often, and really it's kind of a 90s thing. Six Sigma means that there are fewer than 3.4 defects per million opportunities. It's somewhat surprising to me as a chemical engineer that the pharma industry generally operates below Six Sigma, and well below in many cases, according to our sampling and testing results. Advanced manufacturing can help reshore drug manufacturing facilities and aid domestic drug manufacturers in competing globally. It can do this because it requires a highly skilled workforce to design and oversee AM technologies, and I believe the U.S. has the advantage here. In addition, the very latest financial modeling from some of our grantees at the University of Maryland suggests that U.S. pharma manufacturing comes out ahead when employing AM, even under the current tax rates. And as tentative support for this, I'll just say that over 80% of the approved drugs made with AM now are made in the United States. So AM can also speed the development of novel therapeutics and help products reach the market faster after approval, particularly by significantly decreasing the burden of scale-up. It can help prevent drug shortages. Sadly, quality-related manufacturing issues cause 62% of drug shortages, and those are pre-COVID numbers. A big reason why AM got so hot over the last year is because we collectively realized that manufacturing agility and flexibility have value, and they can help us pivot in an emergency. And as such, nearly $500 million of federal funding has gone toward AM technologies over the last year and a half or so. In the current landscape, we are seeing a rapid emergence of advanced manufacturing technologies. You've already heard about our Emerging Technology Program, which has now held over 100 industry-sponsored meetings. We have efforts in advanced manufacturing to drive toward a long-held vision of having a maximally efficient, agile, flexible pharmaceutical manufacturing sector that reliably produces high-quality drugs. That said, we recognize that the emergence of these technologies means that the regulatory landscape needs to evolve as well. So, we're reviewing the regulatory landscape and then working to ensure its readiness to be able to accommodate new technologies over the next 5 to 10 years. We're calling this initiative the Framework for Regulatory Advanced Manufacturing Evaluation, or FRAME, and I will talk about it in more detail here today. We need a regulatory framework that provides certainty for stakeholders and is flexible enough to handle the technologies we might see down the line. We felt it was important that we as an agency advance our understanding of innovations in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So we funded the National Academies to gather public input. A series of workshops brought together industry, academic, and government agencies to discuss the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Now, there were 2 workshops in February and June of last year that resulted in a consensus report that you can now read online. And there will be a final workshop later this week to review and discuss the consensus report. This report allowed us to get a better sense of what these emerging technologies look like, how they'll be applied in the pharmaceutical sector, and most importantly, their impact on public health. We also felt it was important to share a vision for the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing technologies. Now, the dawn of Industry 4.0 forces us to visualize what a fully digitized and autonomous manufacturing world might look like and how it could impact pharmaceutical operations and regulations. We shared some of this vision in a paper we published earlier this year on Industry 4.0. There will be new operating paradigms as a result of digitization, automation, real-time data integration, and other technologies. And if anything, I think COVID-19 accelerated the need for these types of manufacturing technologies because they can be responsive to rapidly changing demand and reduce our dependence on human interventions in manufacturing. Because of our engagements through the Emerging Technology Program and the National Academies, we cataloged the relevant emerging technologies, and we've identified 4 that we believe will play a major role over the next 5 to 10 years. They are end-to-end continuous manufacturing, or E2E/CM, distributed manufacturing, or DM, point-of-care manufacturing, or POC, and artificial intelligence, which everyone knows as AI. Now, let me explain a bit more about what these technologies are. First, end-to-end CM is a fully integrated process in which raw materials or chemical intermediates are continuously fed into and transformed within a system, and finished drug products are continuously removed from that system. The second is DM, and this is a centralized mobile manufacturing platform that can be deployed to multiple locations, overseen and coordinated by a single quality management system. Third, we have POC, and POC can be described as a DM process or a subset of DM that utilizes manufacturing operations distributed to locations in close proximity to patient care. This includes places such as hospitals, nursing homes, and physician offices where the manufactured product is intended to be administered. And finally, there is AI, which includes software and hardware systems designed by humans that can perceive their environment through data acquisition, interpret the structured or unstructured data, reason on the knowledge, and then decide the best actions. To ground this a bit, though, let me give you some quick examples of advanced manufacturing technologies so you understand better what we're dealing with. If you are familiar with an advanced manufacturing technology already, it is likely to be continuous manufacturing, or CM. Basically, CM employs a steady flow of material from one unit operation to the next, rather than the traditional 1950s batch model that manually moves material from one vat to the next. As a chemical engineer, I was a bit shocked to find out most drugs are still made in batches, as continuous manufacturing is really quite common in other industries, for example, with commodity chemicals, petroleum, and the like. You may be aware that CDER has approved several drug products recently that are manufactured using CM, but we are now seeing end-to-end CM, which is basically the CM we've seen to date on steroids. Rather than turning an API into a drug product, end-to-end CM starts with raw materials and turns them into API and then into drug product in a continuous process. Our regulatory framework is largely set up to accommodate batch manufacturing, in which we isolate and test material between unit operations. As a manufacturer moves from batch to continuous unit ops, to continuous drug product or drug substance, and then finally to end-to-end continuous processing, the risk, including the regulatory risk, gets higher, but so does the potential reward. Now, CM really blew up over the last year related to onshoring production of certain drugs, and the government put a considerable amount of money into these types of platforms. Several companies are currently engaged with our emerging technology program on end-to-end CM, and we will see regulatory submissions in the next 5 to 10 years. I hope you've wrapped your head around end-to-end CM, and you'll hear more about it later, but let me share another technology that perhaps does more than challenge the current paradigm. It actually creates a new one. As you know, our regulatory framework for drugs is largely built around discrete manufacturing facilities under the control of a local quality management system. Distributed manufacturing, or DM, typically comprises prefabricated, mobile, modular manufacturing and testing units. And a significant amount of effort has gone into developing these mobile pods, as they're sometimes called, over the last decade or so. This type of technology may sound like science fiction, but several companies are currently in our emerging technology program and developing products manufactured with this technology, and we will soon see regulatory submissions. Although there are other technologies out there, we do believe that end-to-end CM and distributed manufacturing will be the technologies we will see in regulatory submissions first. And you will be hearing more about both of these technologies later this afternoon. Here's another thing to consider. These technologies do not exist in a vacuum. There are many advanced technologies that could be deployed together. For example, some DM will employ CM, and some DM will be designed to operate outside of a cGMP environment closer to the point of care. For example, you could have something in the middle bottom of this slide that uses end-to-end, continuous, distributed, point-of-care manufacturing controlled by artificial intelligence. This is not science fiction anymore. This is something that is happening. In Frame, we want to make sure that we take a systematic and phased approach to developing a regulatory framework. In doing so, we've divided our efforts into 3 phases thus far: building the foundation, planning the implementation, and finally setting things in motion. And we are right now at the point where we are transitioning into phase 3. We call phase 1 building the foundation, and this is where, based on our knowledge of relevant technologies, we brought all of the relevant OPQ experts together to assess existing guidance, regulations, and statutory authorities for gaps and pain points. Now let me explain briefly what I mean by gaps and pain points. Regulatory gaps refer to provisions, regulations, or guidance governing quality assessment, including inspections, that could preclude the approval of an application proposing to use AM. Pain points, on the other hand, are other regulatory challenges that include but are not limited to things like ambiguous regulatory language, lack of guidance on a subject, or gaps in our technical knowledge. Let me give you some examples of the types of things we might consider gaps and pain points. This might be the applicability of regulatory terminology or guidance that does not or may not account for these emerging technologies. Could be potential holes in drug application requirements. Could be the ability of these emerging technologies to comply with current regulations and standards. Now, a framework will need to address these gaps and pain points. Let me give you a flavor for the specific gaps and pain points we've uncovered for the key technologies. Most, if not all, of the gaps and pain points related to end-to-end CM are covered in the ICH Q13 guideline and draft guidance, which is now out for public comment. There are a few gaps and pain points that are not specific to end-to-end CM, but that may be related to end-to-end CM, as well as other technologies that may still need to be addressed. For example, this may include something like continuous process verification with a strategy for deploying in-process controls. For DM, there are potential issues related to how and where one registers a site and executes post-approval changes while conforming to the existing regulations. Of course, as POC is a subset of DM, these same issues apply, as well as additional runs related to, for example, the host site environment, the central control site, and the strategy for site inspection. For AI technologies, there will be tremendous amounts of information generated, and this information will need to be stored safely. New possibilities will open up for using AI for adaptive control, and this, in and of itself, could be a new paradigm. Now that you have a sense of the gaps and the pain points that I covered earlier, Phase 2 of our effort focused on making recommendations to address these gaps and pain points and planning for the long-term implementation of the framework. During this period, we conducted an in-depth impact analysis to inform potential recommendations. What this means is that instead of looking at the gaps and pain points for new technologies, this impact analysis looked in two directions. That is, it also included how potential changes to the framework would impact existing technologies. This view enabled us to come up with a series of preliminary recommendations for the framework. Phase 3 is a multi-year effort that we begin by explaining what we're doing and also asking for your help. First, we are increasing public outreach to share information and provide visibility into what we're doing. In fact, that is a big reason why I'm here at today's symposium. Then, we are going to gather input from the public on our gaps and pain points to further inform our thinking. Once we've had an opportunity to understand the issues and leverage both our scientific and policy expertise, we'll begin implementing different components of the regulatory framework. In Phase 3, our plan is to seek input, eliminate hurdles, clarify expectations, and harmonize internationally. In Phase 3, we will be seeking input, eliminating hurdles or barriers, clarifying expectations, and deploying these technologies, and harmonizing internationally with our regulatory partners to ensure a consistent approach. The crux of our outreach will be public white papers identifying the regulatory gaps and pain points released for public comment. You can expect to see white papers on these gaps and pain points that we will share. We'll then take the public comments and post final versions of these white papers, taking all input into account. Now, these white papers and the associated recommendations we develop will inform an overall internal frame roadmap. I hope you come away today with an appreciation for the importance of the regulatory framework keeping pace with innovation, and just how critical that is for public health. We want to be as innovative as the new technologies we're tasked with regulating. I hope you understand how we're pursuing a systematic approach for a regulatory framework and using continued scientific and policy expertise so we can be thoughtful and prepared as we begin implementing elements of a framework. And finally, I hope you'll support or join us as we seek public input to develop and implement a cohesive regulatory framework. We're fortunate to have so many opportunities to engage with stakeholders, and I want to thank you all so much for your time. We'll now do a quick test of your knowledge with 2 challenge questions. Let's see if you can get them right based on what I shared in this presentation. I talked about 4 different technologies today. My first challenge question is, true or false, distributed manufacturing, or DM, is a decentralized mobile manufacturing platform that can be deployed to multiple locations? The answer is true. I talked about the need for a regulatory framework to provide certainty to stakeholders and, in particular, potential applicants. My second challenge question is, true or false, the planned regulatory framework is intended to only address current manufacturing innovation? The answer here is false. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about FRAME today, and there are some great talks on the science and application of advanced manufacturing still to come. Please do stick around for those and our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for those excellent presentations. Dr. Lee and Dr. Fisher will now join us in a panel for questions and discussion. If you have not yet had a chance, please enter your questions in the Q&A chat pod. Our first question is directed to Dr. Lee. Can you talk about FDA's view on the use of data science in the manufacturing process, the approach industry should adopt in their IND or BLA submission?
Yeah, thank you for this question. First of all, I want to say that FDA support using the data science in the manufacturing process from both a development perspective as well as the commercial perspective. And even based on the experience we already have under the Emerging Technology Program, I believe that some companies already came to us to discuss using the advanced data analytics as well as modeling to develop their manufacturing process and support the control strategy of the commercial processes. And then on top of this, I also want to point out that within OPQ, we have a dedicated modeling and simulation group. This group have an expertise to analyze and understand or do a modeling to use a large data set to help us to understand how they actually to use with respect to the control strategy and the commercial production. So I think we have enough expertise to evaluate in this area. And then also, as mentioned by Adams, we are also looking at the regulatory framework to further make sure that our regulation will be able to accommodate more advanced approach like the AI and or more like advanced modeling approach to help us in the manufacturing area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. We do have another question for you. Is there a database that companies could consult to determine if an emerging technology has been submitted and or graduated?
Yes, I think like we have developed a quite comprehensive communication plan if when we decide to graduate certain technology, and one 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 place you actually can find what technology we are going to graduate is the ETT public website. if you go there, you will see what technology we have graduated. And then we will also like provide ETT member will also go to other conferences and forums to present the latest update on the emerging technology program, including the graduation. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses, Dr. Lee. We do have a couple questions that have come in for Dr. Fisher. First, how does the recently passed U.S. House of Representatives Bill H.R. 4369 play a role in the approaches and plans shared? Bill H.R. 4369 promotes advanced manufacturing through the creation of national centers of excellence in continuous manufacturing at various universities across the country. I heard the Centers for Excellence would be tasked with working with the U.S. FDA to craft a national framework for advanced and continuous manufacturing, including workforce development, standardization, and collaboration with manufacturers, per a recent announcement from the House Energy and Commerce Committee.
Thank you for the question. I can't comment specifically on the legislation, but I will say that science and research is an important foundation for everything we do, but especially for everything that we do related to advanced manufacturing. You'll hear later this afternoon some of the science and research that we conduct in CDER, and also that we fund for others to collaborate with us on outside of CDER, and how it's really gone into fueling these programs that you just heard from Larry and I. So stay tuned for that. And I do think that additional research, be it at universities or through consortia and the like, can help us as long as we have the information that flows from that research to the agency, and then it can enable our use in the evaluation and approval of some of these types of technologies. So I'm looking forward to a really healthy ecosystem around advanced manufacturing. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. We do have another question for you. Can you share any specific incentives or initiatives for faster review or approval of drugs produced via AM in the U.S.?
Thank you for that question. It's a good incentive to participate in the program that Larry described here, and that's the Emerging Technology Program. I think it's a really ideal way for applicants or even potential applicants to begin to engage with the agency so that both of us can understand a bit better what we can expect as we move forward through the regulatory review and approval process. And this isn't a direct incentive, but I would just point out, and I'm sure Larry will like the fact that I highlight this accomplishment of his program, but a number of the technologies that have been approved in the Emerging Technology Program to this point have been approved in advance of their user fee goal date. So I know a big risk that we often hear related to advanced manufacturing is that manufacturers are worried about the fact that it might delay their approvals. And if you look at the data based on the performance of Larry's Emerging Technology Program, we've actually done the opposite. We've been able to approve them ahead of the typical goal dates. So again, I think the best incentive is to be involved in that Emerging Technology Program. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. We have a few more questions, turning it back to Dr. Lee. First, how do we contact FDA for feedback on new technology and collaboration with the ETT?
Thank you for the question. Actually, so quite straightforward. If you go, we have published a guidance, the Emerging Technology Program guidance. And in the guidance, they actually lay out the process and procedure for you guys to follow to apply for to apply for the acceptance into emerging technology program. So briefly, all you need to do is prepare a 5-page proposal. And within this proposal, you need to justify why your technology is innovative and have a positive impact on product quality. And then just send the proposal to emerging technology emails. So I think it's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for responding to that question. We have another question for you. Can you please comment on best practices for contract manufacturers who engage in advanced manufacturing technologies to engage the agency? Is the ETP still applicable in the absence of a product-specific application?
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. The ETP is still applicable for the contract manufacturers who are interested to engage with the agency regarding their proposed new technology. And I want to highlight and emphasize that the key feature of emerging technology program is that you do not need to identify the product or molecules associated with the proposed technology in order to have an engagement with the emerging technology team. So yes, the answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. We are going to go back to Dr. Fisher now for a few more questions. We have some coming in. So, are the other FDA centers participating in developing the framework?
That's a great question. I think when it comes to some of the really big picture things, such as regulations, we really need to be careful that we don't do things that may negatively impact other parts of the agency. And I think because of that, we're right now in the process of where we're expanding out the participation in our group to make sure that everyone is heard across the agency in the development of this framework. And one thing in particular that I would highlight here, and this was mentioned in a recent FDA Voices blog authored by CDER Director Patrizia Cavazzoni and also OPQ Director Mike Kopcha, and that is the development of an internal Center for the Advancement of Manufacturing Pharmaceuticals and Biopharmaceuticals. And this is something that we've set up to improve our collaboration between CDER and SBIA and to make sure that we stay coordinated on science and policy matters that relate to advanced manufacturing between those two centers. And I think it's a really promising way for us to do that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. We have another question for you. You mentioned a NASEM workshop later this week. What will that workshop entail?
Yes, good question. It's actually tomorrow and the next day, so quite a busy week to talk about advanced manufacturing here. And I mentioned in my talk that there was a consensus study report that came out from an ad hoc committee at NASEM related to innovations in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And the purpose of the next few days is to discuss the report that came out, discuss potential solutions to some of the problems that were identified in the report, to discuss some of the actions that we're already taking or will take as a result of some of what came in that report. And then also, the report came out at somewhat of an odd time. I might describe it as mid-COVID. And I think there are some lessons that we've perhaps learned since the report was released, and perhaps some things that have changed since the report was released. And this is an opportunity to bring stakeholders together to discuss some of those changes. And please feel free to attend if you're interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Fisher. We do have another question for you. What will happen to 21 CFR Parts 210 and 211 as your project moves forward?
That's a very good question. I will not comment specifically on those regulations, but I will just say as it comes to regulations that there are three main approaches you can take. One is to try to operate within the existing regulations. The second approach is trying to revise the existing regulations. And then the third approach is writing new regulations. And I think they all have their advantages and disadvantages. In the short term, operating within what's already there is perhaps the easiest, but also perhaps not the most ideal solution in the long run. And then options 2 and 3 obviously require a lot of care. And part of that is related to what I mentioned before. We want to make sure that if there are any changes to regulations, that they don't have any unforeseen negative consequences on anything that's relying on those regulations. So in the future, we are going to take a very, very careful look at how we handle some of these regulations. And I think the two mentioned there are some critical ones. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. There is another question for you. Would the white papers be published in the ETP or on the ETP website?
I think it's still TBD where we will publish those white papers, but that certainly sounds like a very reasonable suggestion. So thank you to whomever put it out there.
Thank you. Turning it back to Dr. Lee. Let's see, we have additional questions coming in. Here is one for you. Will the ETT members still be able to be involved for meetings or applications that utilize technologies graduated from ETP?
The answer is yes. We actually, the emerging technology members will be available anytime for our quality, other quality assessor from the OPQ. If they have any question, they can serve, the ETT members can serve as a subject matter experts to provide assistance to evaluating the technology that has been graduated from the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. We are going to switch back over to Dr. Fisher for another question. Can you comment on efforts to harmonize advanced manufacturing strategies with other global agencies?
Yes, and thank you for the question. And Larry certainly has a lot of insights into this as well. The one thing that I would point to related to international harmonization is ICH Q13. There's a guideline and draft guidance out right now for comment. The subject of Q13 is continuous manufacturing, and I know a lot of effort went into pulling together the global regulators that came together to draft this document. And certainly I would invite anyone who has any comments that they'd like to make on that to please take a look at the draft guidance that's out there now. And then as it relates to other technologies, I would say one of the really interesting things to me is that there are different horizon lines for the various technologies. Some, like continuous manufacturing, are here now. Some, like artificial intelligence, may come later. And I think because of that, the need for international harmonization will also have different horizon lines. And so we'll keep an eye on that as we continue to mature and also as these technologies continue to mature. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Lee and Dr. Fisher. I think we're out of time for our panel discussion. We will now go into a short break.